In this example, I will find the solutions to the equation 2 sine squared x plus 5 sine x equals -3, where x is between 0 and 360 degrees. All right, so the first thing to notice here is that, the equation only involves one trig function. It only involves sine, but it's quadratic. You've got a sine squared here. In your algebra course, whatever last algebra course you remember, you solve most methods of solving quadratic equations begin with getting a 0 on one side. If you're going to solve by factoring or solve using the quadratic formula, either way you need a 0 on one side. And so that's how I would suggest you start the solution to this equation. So if I copy down the original equation, then the first thing that should be done is to add 3 to both sides. So you have 2 sine squared x plus 5 sine x plus 3 equals 0. Now this thing has the form of a quadratic equation, but instead of like a 2x squared plus 5x plus 3, you have 2 and then sine of x squared. So one way, if you don't want to deal with the trigonometry and the quadratic equation at the same time, you could do a substitution. You could let u be a stand-in for sine of x. And the way that helps is, okay, well then sine squared becomes just u squared. Sine of x, well that's just u. And if I copy down the rest of this as is, then now it's the quadratic equation that you're used to. And you can factor this in whatever method you prefer. I'm not going to do any of the, more algorithmic approaches that kind of take longer, like divide and slide or AC. I'm going to do just the good old guess and test here. So the only way to factor 2u squared, if we're going to use integers, is 2u times 1u. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in the first position. Whatever is supposed to multiply to give you this first term is going to be the 2 terms that are in the first position when you factor. Equals 0 here. Now, whatever goes in the second position in each of these factors, the product should be 3. And so we only have one option there as well, 3 times 1, if we're going to use integers. So it's just a matter of, does the 3 go here or here? Now the outside-inside part, if you're used to the FOIL method, the outside-inside part is where you should get the positive 5u, when you multiply the outside terms times the inside terms. Multiply the outside terms side each other and add that to the inside terms. So if we put a 1 here and a 3 here, note that, okay, now first position 2u times u, okay, there's 2u squared. Outside 2u times 1 gives me 2u. Inside gives me 3u, so that adds up to 5u plus 3. All right, so one way or another you want to get this thing factored. If you want to go back and look up divide and slide method or something like that, you can. And let me highlight these u's in red. So once you've got it factored, then it's time to probably put back the sine of x in each of those factors. So I'm going to put it back here. All right, so we had 2 times u, which is sine x, plus 3, and then 2 times u, which is sine x, plus 1. Oops, and the 2, man, I knew I was not going to get all that. There, that was just sine x plus 1. Now we can. Sorry about that. There, froze on me for a second. Okay, let me just double check. So 2 sine squared plus 2 sine plus this, so that's 5 sine plus 3. Yeah, so this looks good. And now set each factor equal to 0. the same way you would if you were solving for x. So set this factor equal to 0. That leads you to 2 sine x equals -3. And so sine of x equals -3 over 2. And let me stick with that for a second. So that's -1.5. Remember the graph of sine. Looks like this. Its maximum value that it reaches over and over is +1. Its minimum value that it reaches over and over is -1, but it's never less than that. -1.5 is down here, and the graph never touches it. This equation right here has no solution. Sine x only reaches values between -1 and 1, and so it's not going to ever reach the -3/2 there. All right, so that factor led us to no solution. We can set the other factor equal to 0, though. Isolate the trig function. Once you have the trig function by itself, then you would grab your unit circle. And for -1, I'm going to just do a quick sketch here. Remember that sine is the y-coordinate on the unit circle. So the y-coordinate is -1 down here. You'll see a point with coordinates 0, -1. This corresponds to a value of x of 270 degrees, or 3 pi over 2 radians. But since we were told to find x between 0 and 360 degrees, it's assumed that we want the radian solution.